Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar about how to make your nomination stand out in the Community Achievement Award. So firstly, congrats to all of you for being on this call, because it means you are an amazing community champion, a local legend, or someone who's just doing something really positive in your community. That's what these awards are all about, celebrating the stories of people who are making positive impacts in their community. And we know that you're not here to toot your own horn, to big up yourself. That's not what it's about. It's about acknowledging that, without people who are making these kind of contributions to the community, then our communities aren't the strong, vibrant, amazing places where we live, want to raise families, start careers, all of that wonderful stuff. So by sharing a bit of your story, we hope to acknowledge you and also to inspire others to do the same. So as we get into this webinar, some of the topics that we'll be talking about are, firstly, why it's worth taking the time to submit. We're all busy people, and sometimes, it's a fair chunk out of your day or week or any number of time to actually get in there, answer the questions, upload the attachments, and I bet that there'll be some who will be thinking, I just don't have the time to do it. So I'll let you know why it is worth taking that time. We'll also go over some practical tips from the awards team. So our team at Awards Australia, who run the Community Achievement Awards, we are all experienced in running awards programs. We've all been working on these for multiple years. And so we've picked up some pretty good tips from over the years of doing this. So we'll share them with you as well. The next one is, what does a judge look for? Because it's all well and good for our team to tell you what we think is the best way to go about it. But at the end of the day, we have no input in the judging process whatsoever. We organise the judges, bring them together and let them do their bit. So we've surveyed them, we've asked the judges what they're looking for, and we've compiled some of the most common responses. That way you can get an insight onto what judges are actually looking for, what stands out to them, and what's going to help your nomination have the best chance of progressing. And we'll finish with a time for any questions, so please ask away. All right, so firstly, why it's worth taking the time to submit. So, the first one is fairly self-explanatory. We're all about sharing stories of amazing community champions, but we can't do that if you don't submit your nomination. So without you taking the time to put those answers in, we can't celebrate you. And we do that in a lot of different ways, firstly through social media. So if anyone here has already hit that submit button to submit their nomination, they're just here to, get a few extra tips, then you would have received an email saying, we want to celebrate you on our social media channels. Fill out this extra form, it's only a little one, so we can do so. And that gives us a chance to put out heaps of different posts about people who've been nominated. And then that way it doesn't matter whether you make us a finalist or not, because we get a chance to congratulate you on your nomination. In addition, we also send out media releases to local papers in your local area. So it doesn't matter where you're from, we will send out a media release to that paper and encourage them to write a story about you. So as you can see, just by hitting that submit button, just by taking the time to nominate, there's already a couple of ways that we're trying to acknowledge you and share your story. So I think it's worth for that alone. And of course, as you progress through the awards process, there's more chances for that to happen. For our semi-finalists, for our finalists, and then of course for the winners as well, who are featured on TV ads that go across the 7 network, which is pretty awesome, pretty cool. So the second one here is something that we've had a lot of feedback from. Many people have given this feedback to us, and it was something that I think you wouldn't come to mind when you're going about nominating in awards, but it really is a reflection opportunity. It's a chance to think about what's been happening for you, whether it's a personal nomination, whether it's for your organization, and reflect on the wins that you've had and celebrate those wins. We don't do it enough. Too often we think about the challenges and the struggles that we've faced, but we've got to also remember that we overcome those challenges, and that's worth celebrating. And when you go through that nomination process, I guarantee that those types of things will come up and you'll be able to look back at it and think, yeah, geez, we have actually done a great job, or that was tough and we got past it, or we're getting past it. So a lot of people tell us that that is actually, one of the highlights of them being part of the Community Achievement Awards process. Next point is about networking and growth opportunities. And of course, at the gala dinner is the number one thing that comes to mind for people around networking, getting there and being in a room full of amazing people who are doing things in their community, industry, and all of that kind of thing, and leaders. You get to network with sponsors and judges and things like that as well. But also through the, as I said before, that we're sharing stories through social media and things like that. A lot of people have told us that they reach out to the other finalists and connect with them, work together. There's been many times where people have then actually done business together or assisted each other, in a not-for-profit or their community groups. So there's a lot of different ways that even if you can't attend the gala dinner, that you can network and have those opportunities to grow. And lastly, this one's pretty self-explanatory. You've got to be in it to win it. If you don't submit your nomination, you have no chance of becoming a semi-finalist or a finalist or a winner. So the amount of people who have told us that they submit, they never once thought that they would be shortlisted through to the top 10, let alone selected as a finalist, let alone be announced as the winner. You might surprise yourself. So take the time to submit and see where it takes you. There's no harm in doing it. It doesn't cost anything to submit the nomination. So on to the next slide, we're talking about some practical tips from the awards team. As I said, our team have been doing this for a long time now. So these are some things that, maybe aren't as exciting, but we know that they work and that they're good tips. So number one is about using Google Chrome as the browser. A lot of people have Edge as their default, Microsoft Edge default browser if they use Microsoft products, but we find that Google Chrome works best. It's what the awards portal was kind of optimized for using Google Chrome. And so it's not a major one, but if you have the choice, if you use both browsers, like we were just talking about it before, sometimes we use Edge for something, we use Chrome for something else. Yeah, we suggest using Chrome as the browser for your internet, for your awards portal nomination, and little things like if you remember typing the questions into the question box, the answers, sorry, the question box looks quite small initially, but if you're using Google Chrome, you can actually click and drag that text box out to make it bigger. And it just is a bit easier then to type out the information. The next one is about how your name is referred, whether that's your name for an individual or whether it's for a group. So I can see that we've got joining the call Dance at Southwest. So if the nomination is for Dance at Southwest, but you put it under your name, then that's how it's going to be referred to as you move through the awards process, including how it's listed on the certificate, and if you're lucky enough to be the winner, on the trophy. So if your nominations for the group, make sure the group name is properly listed and how you want it to be referred to. If you're a proprietary limited company and you want that on the official certificate and the way it's presented in the media, then list that accordingly. If you have a specific way your name is to be referred to, for example, if you have a middle name and that's just part of your professional, how you present yourself, ensure that's in there as well. So just because time after time we see the name, written really informally in that field in the nomination form, and then later down the track, people are saying, "Oh, that's not how I want my name listed." So ensure it's correct in the nomination form, and then that will carry through to the rest of the awards process. The next one is a common question that we get, which is about if you've been nominated. This is the most common occurrence. If you've been nominated by someone else, and perhaps they wrote a little, testimonial about you, and then all of a sudden you've got to write your answers in the first person, it might feel a bit weird, or you're not comfortable about talking about yourself in that way. So just write your answers to the nomination questions in the way you feel comfortable. If you feel comfortable doing that in the first person, I worked for 20 years in this organization, blah, blah, blah. I did this, I did that. That's great. If you prefer to have your name as a third person, Alice, for example, we talked to you earlier, Alice was working in the organization for 20 years. That's also fine. Just keep it consistent would be my main tip there. Don't chop and change between first person and third person. And this one is a really underrated tip here. Even inject your personality. If you're, a really informal person and, you like to have a joke or something like that, write in that way. You don't feel like you have to write in a really formal way because it won't come across naturally and you won't be putting your best foot forward in the nomination. So write in the way you feel comfortable. let the judges see your personality, because it's going to stand out. If you think about if you're reading, 20 applications all about the same topic, and one person, really writes in a kind of a unique way, and you kind of feel like you're almost talking to them, that's going to leap off the page and stand out to you, and it will do the same for the judges. The last practical tip is about letting people know that you can enter into 2 categories. And this is because some people aren't sure which category to enter. There might be 2 that they've identified as being really appropriate, and then they have to pick one. You can enter 2, just so you know it's within the terms and conditions to enter 2 at a maximum. And so we do recommend, if you feel there's 2 appropriate, go into 2. Kind of goes back to my point on the previous slide about you've got to be in it to win it. We often will hear from the judges that, oh, that candidate was fantastic, however, they're not quite in the right category. So by entering the second category, you double your chances, and there you go. That's basically you double your chances. That's a good thing, I think. All right, so let's move on to talk about what the judges are looking for. So again, this is actual feedback from the judges that they've told us is something that really helps a nomination stand out. And the first one is about providing at least 1 referee. So on the nomination form, where the section for your contact details are, you can enter up to 2 referees there. And so we definitely suggest doing at least 1. And the reason is that the judges have told us that just shows there's someone else there to vouch for what you've written, or who can back up, what you've written in the nomination form. And so the judges are able to contact those referees as well. So have a think about it. For example, your best mate, is that a good referee? Who knows? Yeah, that's up for you to tell us. But if there's someone, if you're a volunteer in Rotary, for example, use an example, having the Rotary president is a great referee. If you've done something in your local community and your local MP is really aware of that, and across the work that you're doing, have them as a referee. So they're the type of things we're talking about, someone who is going to add value to your nomination. And to take that tip to the next level is to ask that referee to write a small testimonial or reference or letter of support for your nomination. That takes this from a good tip to a great tip. And the last thing I'll say about providing referees, always just quickly send them a message or an email or something, or a phone call, and just advise them that you're putting them at the referee. If you're not asking for permission, at least advise them just so that they're aware, because if the judges do contact them, you want them to be ready for that and not be surprised. The next one is about using the attachment section as evidence. So if you scroll down to the very bottom of the nomination form, there's a section where you can upload supporting documents as attachments. You can have up to 10 documents. And obviously there's, good, better and best ways to use those attachments. So I suppose starting with good, you can upload 10 photos of yourself, and that just shows that you're a real person. It provides that visual element to your nomination, and that's probably better than nothing. However, to take it to a better example would be to have those photos as showing you carrying out some of the things you talked about in your nomination. So if your nomination is about your business doing good in the community, for example, you sponsored a local event, you spoke at a community gathering or something like that, show a photo of you delivering that talk at the local event. Show a photo of you sponsoring that community club or whatever it is. So that's kind of what I mean about using the attachment as evidence. And then if you want to go to the best level, a mix of photos and maybe other documents. So for example, if it is a business type award, then you want to be showing something like your annual report, again, to showcase that what you've written is backed up in the annual report. As I said before with the referee, the letter of support, attaching that to the nomination. So they're the ways that you can use those attachments. And just so you know, the questions that you answer, the written questions, is definitely the number one thing that the judges are considering. And the attachments backs up those questions and takes those questions to the next level. So that's how you use the attachments to really strengthen your nomination. The next point is about referring to the category description. So Again, on the nomination form, the award category description's at the top. So you can always scroll back up to the top and you can refer to that. Sometimes it's easy to get stuck into, answering the questions in just in a generic way. But remember, the category description was actually put there for a reason. It's written by the awards category sponsor partner and by our awards team to really tell you what that award's about. So if you're kind of thinking, I'm not sure how to answer this question, or what am I really getting across here? Go back, read the category description, read the question that you're answering, and refer to those in your answer. It's kind of like applying for a job. There's key selection criteria outlined there. You want to refer to that in your application for the job. It's the same way with an awards nomination. The next one is about showcasing your purpose and impact. Now, I've had some people say to me like, oh, what does that exactly mean? It's a little bit wishy-washy. Showcase your purpose and impact. What is that about? I suppose the easiest way to describe that is if you think of the judges, I would be surprised if anyone here could tell me one of the judges' names off the top of their head on what they do. It's the same way with the judges reading your nomination. They probably aren't familiar with your work. So you need to kind of describe it to them. So sometimes we get stuck into the work that I'm doing in the nomination, typing out the examples A, B, C. But it's good to start with why you're doing that work, why you're volunteering in the community, why you started your business. And that's where I'm talking about the purpose. So start with that. It's almost like telling a story. You're taking them on that journey of what you're doing. And then after you've explained why you're doing it and what you're doing, then lastly is the impact of that work. So it's almost like a 3-step process. Explain why you're doing it, what's the purpose of it, what it is, and then lastly, what's the impact, what's the outcome, what's the achievement. And that's really critical with a awards nomination, because not only are you explaining what you're doing, but why it's beneficial. You can even go into who it's benefiting as well. So that's what I mean about showcasing your purpose and impact. And again, like I said, this is from the judges themselves. Time after time, they will say, this is a really interesting nomination. It sounds so good, but I'm just not really sure what it is they're achieving. What's the impact of their work? I'd love to put this person as the winner or impact because the story is so great, but what are they actually achieving? What's the impact of it? So that's what I mean there. That really, segues and is tied into this last point about being specific where you can. If you are writing your nomination that I am a volunteer in the community, then be specific. What do you volunteer in? Is it with a specific organization? Is it your own initiative? How many hours do you volunteer? That's what I mean by being specific, go into the details. And also another way to look at that is around abbreviations or jargon. So if you're in quite a niche area, it can be tempting just to type the abbreviations for things. But in the first instance, you should always spell it out. What is that abbreviation? And then from there, you can abbreviate it. So that's what I mean by being specific where you can. Don't assume that the judges know what you're talking about, even though they are incredibly intelligent, they're amazing leaders in their space. We have to explain everything to them and be specific so that they can understand it and then review it accordingly. I hope that all made sense. I realize I just talked to you guys for like 30, 35 minutes. So if you have any questions about any of those points or something completely unrelated, now is a brilliant time. You can either put it into the chat, you can take yourself off mute and answer the question. The people watching this will definitely appreciate your questions because they may have the same question as well. And while we're waiting for someone to chime in with a question, a friendly reminder that nominations are closing soon, the 11th of August. So it's definitely worth taking that time to submit your nomination in this last week. And I think with, human nature is to think it's going to take longer than it is. So give it a crack, see how long it takes. I don't think it will take as long as you think. And, it's always worth just submitting something, even if you think it's not a winning nomination, because you could be very pleasantly surprised.
Sorry, that was me that left that out.
One question we get about the 2 categories thing I mentioned earlier, that you can nominate into 2 categories. is if your group, your organization is nominated, can a person from the organization be nominated as well? And the answer is
meant to
yes.
start at 10 o'clock and then they're like, especially if it happens for 38 minutes. I'm like, oh, what?
So that's explains that one. That's a common question we get. If there's no questions, if there's some shy people on here, you can always email us afterwards. Our email address, which I will put into the chat for you, is CAA, which stands for Community Achievement Awards, at awardsaustralia.com. Ask us any questions via email. But otherwise, happy nominating. As you can see here, some of the awards categories we've got. We have the Department of Primary Industries Regional Development Economic Development Award, Curtin University School of Education Teaching Excellence Award, Insurance Commission of WA Regional Safety Award, the Conica Minolta Customer Service Award, Hancock Prospecting Development of Northern Regional WA Award, the Beyond Bank Community Group Award, Badgingarra Roadhouse Local Legend Award, and the Awards Australia Business for Good Award. So they're the different award categories we've got. I've just seen a question pop in, where do we find the category types? Easiest place is at our website, which is www.communityawards.org. But I'm also just putting a direct link into the chat, which takes you directly to all the different categories and the descriptions of each category, so you can find the one that suits you best. So Dance at Southwest, I hope that helps. All right, everyone. Well, we'll see you later. Look forward to seeing your nominations come in. And we'll see you at the awards night down the track. Thanks, everyone. Bye.